I think everything happens for a reason. I don't think that there's any coincidences in life. And so I talk a lot about my dad and what he meant to me and the foundation that I was given. And it's so funny because as you have kids, you start remembering more and more of the things that you did when you were your kid's age. So for instance, as our kids are growing up and we're starting to experience things like going to Kings Island, which is an amusement park up in Cincinnati, I start remembering when, we would go there and I would ride on my dad's shoulders and we would ride the racers. And I remember when I would go, my dad would sneak me on. I wasn't tall enough yet, but he'd put his arm around me to make sure I was locked into the car. Growing up through life, that was kind of my normal. That's what I knew. And you don't realize that a lot of people don't have that type of security with someone putting their arm around them and letting them know that life is going to be okay, and that they have them and they have their back and they're going to, support them in whatever they do. And so 7 years ago when I got married, I remember him getting confused or discombobulated a little bit at my wedding, not having directions there. And my dad was always the most supportive. Don't worry about me, Undy, dad'll be okay, no matter what. It was always, he never wanted his kids to worry about him. It was the opposite. He always sacrificed for us. And, when I play back on that day, sometimes it makes me realize, and my sister would tell me, Dad's forgetting a lot of things. I think something's going on. But that was like 7 or 10 years ago. And I think that those were early signs of digression, right? Or, in today's world, I think a lot of us are unaware of how many people get affected with early on dementia, early on Alzheimer's. We look at it as aging, and it is part of aging, right? It's the aging of the brain, it's the wiring of the brain, the plaque in the brain. I think that the coincidence that's not quite a coincidence was, as we were starting to prove it, my dad was at a baseline, and we would see him and spend time with him for dinner, or we'd spend time with him, on kids' birthdays, all of the holidays. And the parallel really from a timing perspective is we started learning more about ketones and the, ketogenic diet, and then how exogenous ketones can affect the brain and using it as an energy source. And I don't think it was by coincidence that this fell in our hands. And I'll never forget walking through an event, the Metabolics Therapeutics Conference, where I met Dr. Mary Newport, and she was describing the story of her learning and diving into the study of ketones because her husband got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she said she was willing to do whatever. She became passionate because of the love that she had for her husband to try to buy more quality time. And I just remember sitting in the audience there, and there's only like 30 people in the room. I mean, you got to understand, it was mostly researchers and academia. This was 4 years ago. And I just remember being empowered, being saddened, being reflective, and just realizing, kind of where my life was and my dad's life was. And that was kind of her passion. She founded ketones through coconut oil, and she started, doing a lot of research on her husband, to the fact of, like, within 7 days of high levels of MCT oil, because it was creating trace elements of ketones, she saw major improvement just in his cognition, right? His awareness. It made me think to myself, this is a conversation that has to go to the world. And even as I sit here today, it's even more prevalent to me than ever before, because as I see my dad, 3 or 4 times a week when I'm in town, there's just a slow digression. And it's probably the hardest thing in the world, and people talk about this with dementia and Alzheimer's. It's harder on the families than it ever is the patients, right? but I just, to see your hero literally withering away in front of you and seeing their most fondest memories vanished, I'll never forget, because, you know, my great-grandmother, my father's grandmother, had dementia along with his mom, and today I remember him saying, I would never want that. Like, that would be, I couldn't imagine living without the magic moments and memories that I've created with my family. That's the greatest possession that I've ever had in the world. And so it breaks my heart to this day to see, you know, to see that, even though, you know, we still moments here and there and a laughter and, you know, with him, you know, or quick experiences, but it's something that millions of people every single year are facing, and millions of people, you know, have gone through this type of experience, and, you know, it really, it hits home. And, you know, so I thought on Alzheimer's Awareness Day, it was important for me to share my stories. You know, my story is still in progress, but it's something that I think, you know, in this world, the one thing that we truly have is time and memories. And I think when it's all said and done, it's going to be the magic moments that we spent with the people that we care about or the lives that we touch the most. How precious is a memory? You know, the reality of it is that ketones and have an impact on the brain. And I think that for me, if you ask me right now what I would give just to have one more day, one more night, one more week with my dad the way he was a decade ago, I would say everything. Like, I would give everything for that one day. You know, money can come and go, you can lose it, you can make it back, but time and memories are the most precious thing. And so I just thought it'd be appropriate to take a quick drive to, this is the drive that I had every morning. Came up this highway right here, Watterson Expressway, and from 4th grade, 3rd grade to 8th grade, my dad would take me to school every day this way, right? And then we'd get off here on Cannons Lane, and, you know, sometimes I'd be asleep, sometimes we'd be talking, sometimes I'd be listening to music, but it was kind of our time together. And this is something that's been embedded in me. Every time I pass this, you know, I remember those times. And I talk a lot about my dad, you know, and something that it's okay to take things for granted. I think sometimes people beat themselves up, you know, I mean, you kind of grow where you're planted, but I think that sometimes we don't realize the blessings that we have in our lives until we can have a contrasting view of it. And so, anyway, so this is one of the things that, you know, you never think about until 20 years later, 30 years later, of that time that was being spent. And, you know, fortunate for me that he had the ability to drive me to school every day. I thought it'd be appropriate to kind of go back, you know, and cherish that memory once again, because I think that environments, locations, you know, have anchors to all of us. And so we are driving to the exact place that he would drop me off for school every day. This was it. It looks the exact same. This is Seneca Park. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. And so this was where we would come. And it was usually every morning right around 7:45 or 8 o'clock. We had school started at 8:15. But this was Christian Academy of Louisville. And we would drive through here. All of this was red. And then this was the gymnasium. And this is where they would let out right here. But when he'd drive me to school, you know, there was an embedding that took place, because every time he dropped me off for school, he'd tell me he loved me, right? All right, love you, Tiger. He called me Tiger. And then when he dropped me off, he would always say, all right, Tiger, go get them. Be positive and confident in all you do, okay? Have a great day.